Victoria Wingell is an organizer currently in Portland, Oregon, currently working with Oregon Wild. And she works nationally with Oregon Wild as a national organization, and she does a lot of collaborating with other groups. Uh, as a community organizer, she works on the ground and in the big picture collaboration. And I'm just going to turn it over to her to talk more about her work and what she's here to share today. So go ahead, Victoria.
Yeah, thanks so much for that introduction. So a bulk of my work is within the Climate Forest campaign. And as Krishinda mentioned, this is a national effort to protect mature and old growth forests on federal lands. So our campaign, we collaborate with groups all across the country. There's some big household name climate groups like Earth Justice, Sierra Club, 350, NRDC, and Center for Biological Diversity. And then we have over 100 local, regional, on-the-ground forest and climate defense groups working with us as well. So altogether, there's about 120 groups working on this campaign right now. Mostly focusing on President Biden's executive order to protect mature and old growth forests. And I'll speak a little bit more about that. But first, I want to just talk about some of the many values and benefits that we have within our mature and old growth forests. Everybody loves trees, but they are just so fascinating. The benefits that they provide for the climate, for our drinking water, and for wildlife. These landscapes, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, I saw there's a few folks, or maybe one or two other folks in Oregon and Washington. These forests store vast amounts of carbon. They sequester it from the atmosphere and store it for decades. So these forests really are just one of our best natural lines of defense against the impacts of climate change. The older the tree, the more resilient it is against wildfire, the more efficient it is at cleaning drinking water for hundreds of thousands of communities. And it also provides really critical habitat for threatened and endangered wildlife species. There are countless of them that rely strictly on mature and old growth forest ecosystems for their survival. And given that there's such a small amount of old growth forests left across the country and across the world, it's really, really important that we do whatever we can to protect what is left and recover and restore what has been lost. So that is the main piece of our campaign's work, basically focusing on commercial logging and the extraction that takes place in our federal public lands. As I mentioned, we have very little left. There's less than 5% of old growth remaining. So our campaign has set the bar at protecting trees once they reach maturity. Around 80 years of age is really when we get to see the most benefits in terms of carbon capture and storage, really filtering out those greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, that's my spiel on old growth and how much I love them. And if you've ever had the opportunity to take a walk or a hike through an old growth forest, you know that there's so many other benefits too for recreation, for your spirituality. Yeah, just really, really beautiful, fantastic ecosystems. And today I want to talk about one of my favorite places in Oregon, within the Willamette National Forest. Thousands of acres of mature and old growth forest was auctioned or was ready to be auctioned off for logging. It's called the Flat Country Timber Sale. This project targeted thousands of acres of mature and old growth forests. And I had the pleasure of visiting this area not too long ago. There's one area of Western red cedars that are hundreds of years old. I mean, these trees were huge, absolutely huge and beautiful. We had a few activist campouts in the area just to really deepen that connection and appreciation for the forest. And things just really spiraled from there. There was a lot of enthusiasm for protecting it. And thankfully, over the holiday period, the Forest Service made the decision to withdraw this sale. But this has been a several year long fight that we have been in. And I'm going to tell you so much more about that. But what I can say about flat country would never do it a justice. So I have a video to share. It's about 3 minutes long, and you get to see all the beauty that is flat country. So I'll pass it to you, Rashinda, if you're able to share that. It was definitely a coordinated effort with many groups across Oregon and across the country. We worked really hard to bring national attention to this area. It was kind of like the poster child for what is wrong with what the Forest Service particularly is doing with our public lands. And we're just really grateful that we got the news that we did. And what's particularly exciting about that was that they cited President Biden's executive order as the major rationale for why they withdrew this sale. Now, withdrawing a timber sale is a really unusual step. It takes a lot of work for them to select the area that they want to log. And so for them to pull back years into that process is like huge and rarely ever done. So basically, President Biden's executive order, it was announced last Earth Day. Some of you may remember it, potentially not, but that's okay. Basically, it was a 3-step directive where federal agencies were asked to define what we even mean by mature and old growth forests. There actually is no definition, and we in conservation believe that's by design. Mature forests around 80 years of age are typically regarded as the sacrifice zones for our forests. Timber companies love them, but the benefits that they provide to our planet really need to outweigh that thirst for profit. So the step 1 is defining them, and then taking an inventory of what is out there on the landscape in our federal forests. And then the final directive is to develop policies to protect them. So our campaign has been wanting to be involved at every step of this process. We really want to make sure they set the bar at 80 years old. And what we want out of this executive order is a lasting, durable rulemaking that actually changes the way that we manage our forests. Rulemaking would permanently protect these large swaths of land and ensure that the greatest number or greatest acreage of our landscape can be protected all at once. So that's our overarching goal. And a lot of what we've done to build up that support is it starts by bringing people out to the forest, showing them exactly what's at stake. And so that's basically what we did for flat country, and we're using this as a model to help other regional groups across the United States to protect their forests, bring them the attention that they need. And it started off with just groups going out into the woods and field checking these areas, leading public hikes. I mentioned the camp out. About 80 of us got together for a weekend camp out and did some training workshops and just got ready for whatever announcement would come from the Forest Service. Then last October, we went out onto the Mackenzie River, which is the watershed that the flat country sale would impact. We all brought our boats and paddles and signs, and 120 of us paddled on the Mackenzie River with a giant floating banner to get some more media attention, keep the drumbeat up, keep the pressure on, and make this impossible to ignore. So we did that in October. Shortly after, in November, in the lead up to COP27, our campaign coordinated a national week of action. So flat country had been included in a report that outlines the top 10 most egregious examples of mature and old growth logging sales taking place across the country. And so we really wanted to use this opportunity to highlight each and every one of those sales. Essentially, the Forest Service has been saying all along that they no longer log mature and old growth forests, which we know is not true. So we called them out on it. We had hundreds of people participate in a national week of rallies. There was 2 in Oregon, We had one in Montana, Alaska for the Tongass. I saw someone mention that in the chat. New Mexico, West Virginia, Vermont, all over the country, people were celebrating our forests and putting pressure on the Forest Service to let them grow. John, I see the roadless rule in the chat. You're correct. We're fighting to codify that, working with some groups in Alaska right now who are protecting the Tongass. Super, super exciting. So we basically had a combination of grassroots strategy. But we also had grass tops strategies in place. And so both really worked to complement each other. A coalition of local groups in Oregon, Oregon Wild, which I work for, Cascadia Wildlands, and WELK. We all worked together to submit an objection letter to the Forest Service, citing the executive order as new information that should be considered before they auction off any of this land. So basically, that's how we got the ball rolling. And then our amazing grassroots activists in Oregon helped to keep the spotlight on them and make sure that they addressed it. And finally, they did. So really, really exciting news. And we are hoping to see this as a model taking place in the rest of the United States. If Oregon's Regional Forest Service is citing the executive order as a reason to withdraw this sale, there is absolutely no reason why the Forest Service should continue forward with sales just like it in other states.
Can you tell us what do you mean when you say grassroots and grass tops? And do you have a couple of examples from each category for the flat country sale that is no longer a sale? So
yeah, when I say grassroots, I mean individuals who really care about protecting this area. So anyone coming from any background can join in this fight with us. We've had petitions, we've had rallies, like I mentioned. We've also asked our grassroots volunteers to submit letters to the editor just to keep this in the news as often as possible. So basically just volunteers. And then for our grass top strategy, we've also had a congressional strategy to accompany this, which really goes hand in hand with our grassroots strategy. Basically, our volunteers would join in town halls, send letters, make phone calls to our local representatives, make sure that they know that this is something that's really important to us. And in turn, our congressional champs would help carry on the message as well. So now we've got multiple points of pressure coming here. We have them from constituents, and we also have them from congressional leaders. So the combination of both of these things, working with federal Forest Service agency staff, really just created the perfect storm that we needed to put this sale to rest.
So I'm a forest girl. I spent some of my formative girlhood running wild in the Canadian forest in Ottawa. And it is so deeply formative. And I always often forget that other people, sometimes they spend their lives not in a forest, not really having walked through an old growth forest or being sort of humbled by trees or having that sense of that web of relationship all around you. You sort of disappear into this huge relationship that you never knew existed, and you just breathe in all of that. And so watching that little film and seeing you in the forest there reminded me of the times that I have made, not just growing up in the forest, but I have since made pilgrimages. I love to go to the redwoods and other forests to just drink it in. How does that change things for you? So what was that experience like, being in that forest and touching those trees, and then the work that you do? Can you share if that added a layer of meaning for you, or what happened for you in that process?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it really changed everything for me. It was really bittersweet and very emotional being in the forest. it is just so beautiful. And, in Oregon, most of our more popular trails that replicate what this forest looks like, they're always so crowded. You're on a designated trail system, so you only get to see so much of it. But this was a very immersive experience. You really got to be within the forest, be a part of it. And this was real deal old growth. I mean, like, just so different than anything that I've been able to see. There was such a thick layer of moss over everything that it was just so comfortable. You could really take a nap wherever you wanted to on the forest floor. And it definitely made me want to do everything that I can in my power to make sure that it stays protected. I wanted to fight as hard as I could for this forest. But just knowing how difficult of a journey that could be, I was also preparing myself for bad news. And I thought this might be my first heartbreak doing this work in forest conservation. But yeah, it was a mix, kind of a roller coaster, honestly. And yeah, I am just ecstatic now that this really special place that is now so personally special to me is safe.